I want to move to the next question about who do you think I should ask next? Is there a person or a list of people that you think I should invite next?
Well, I must confess, I haven't recently looked at the list of people you have already invited. So I may be naming some people you've already talked to. Or one more, if I can add, Faye Thompson.
Ah, yes, I didn't think about her. I don't even I know her, but I don't think she's
Yeah.
on my list. So that's a good. Well, today I talked with Faye Thomas. We talked about optimizing the results instead of the use of her time. How she can choose what happens to her, yet she can choose how to react to the things that happen to her. And about allowing herself to be angry for 15 minutes. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, good evening. And good evening. With me, I have Faye Thompson. I think that's how I should pronounce your name. I didn't ask up front. So Faye. So Faye, yeah, we had all kind of interesting problems, let's say, to get us here together. So, well, and here is I want to show this. For me, is Ghent in Belgium, and for you, it's Columbus in USA, I think. And it shows us where you are. At least Google shows us a little bit where you are. And on my side, it's now 8 minutes after 10 o'clock. And on your side, what's the time at this moment?
It is 8 minutes after 4 p.m.
After 4 p.m. So we have a 6-hour time differences with all these miles in between us. And that's how we record these days. That's thanks to all this technology. We can have a conversation just like we're sitting somewhere together in a bar, or at least that's the hope to have this kind of conversation. So Faye, for the people, the few people who are here that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, like you said, my name's Faye Thompson. I live in Central Ohio. As you saw, we're in the United States, just directly south of the Great Lakes is how I usually describe it, if people are familiar with that. I am a consultant and working primarily in agile transformation space. I've been working with agile teams for 16 or 17 years now in various capacities. I got my start in IT as a business analyst and kind of grew more into product roles over the years. And then eventually, as I was working with agile teams, took on roles like Scrum Master alongside some product work. And then over the years, moved into more of a coaching role, just as I had seen a lot of different environments. So I kind of moved into coaching others in how they might want to find new ways of working.
And like you said, you already came out of the team, so you were part of a team that was working in an agile way, and then gradually grew into these kind of roles. I want to stress this out because we have these days a lot more coaches that are sometimes coming from a totally different background and might have a good coaching experience, but might not always have a background in working in a team. And for that, might not always understand what it means to work in an agile team. So you have that background for a while.
I actually got my start. I would say I've been at this point. I've been working long enough. I got my start in the old, straight up waterfall days, where we did an excessive amount of planning up front. And you really only got to kind of prove out whether your ideas had any validity or whether you had gotten the details correct over a long period of time. So you might come back 6, 12, 18 months later and find out that you had missed the mark. That's actually that was the state of things, I would say, when I entered the industry.
And when you're working as a business analyst, did it ever happen that you were writing documentation and that you moved to another project before the people had even started coding?
Yeah, my first official job as a business analyst, that's exactly the way it was. As a business analyst, you would work on that exhaustive documentation that's kind of referenced in the Agile Manifesto, work on exhaustive documentation, hope you get the details right. You might get, I might spend several months writing that documentation, if I could get time to interview the people who were doing the work or who would be using the tool. Sometimes I had to make that argument that I needed to do that. I couldn't just make it up on my own. I really needed to talk to the people who wanted to be using whatever it was we were building.
Yeah, and that was strange at the time. For some people, it was like, why would you want to talk to the people actually using your product? Why? It was interesting times.
I've had like executives say, you don't need to talk to the people. I'm the executive. I know how this works. So are you saying I don't know how it works? Like, almost defensive. So yeah, making those arguments that we really do need to talk to the people who are going to use the thing we're building. And yeah, build out all the details. And then I might get relatively a handful of hours to talk to designers or a development team who would be trying to execute on the requirements we put together. So when I think of that, even, the amount of hours we put into writing requirements versus the small amount of time we would actually get with the people who were going to execute it. And to your point, they would carry on with these written instructions, and we would move on to the next thing. We would move on to defining the next thing, so that if they had any questions and they did get time with us to ask those questions, we'd often moved on to the next thing. So
and you would not have any feedback if whatever you thought of was good or bad, let alone if that executive had any feedback. Or he might get feedback because the developers, but then it was probably they just blamed it all on you, and you would never even know in that case. Right. So that's the kind of thing that I think both of us, we saw happen a lot in these days. And it's interesting because I see sometimes people today complaining about Agile for whatever reasons, but they don't always, people new to the industry, they don't realize how bad it was in those days because of the things we just discussed. So already really interesting. Thanks for sharing, because that's indeed is important for, I want to bring in people here who have experience, who have been in the industry for a long time, and also sometimes new people who are really new into development or new into Agile. But it's good that we bring both sides, that people can realize, oh, that's how we used to work in those days. And this is why basically they invented Agile and why we're working or trying to work the way we're trying to work these days.
Right.
Okay, let's move to that very first question. What is something that that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
I think the thing I hear people say that they find surprising is they don't know that before IT, I had a career as an attorney.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started out as an attorney my first few years of my career. I worked as an attorney primarily in financial services, estate planning. And then I just decided I needed a career change. And
just wait, because you say rather quickly, I needed a career change. What does an attorney in this kind of role do? Just to give an understanding.
Well, it's kind of funny. You in estate planning, you get to know their clients you're working with, and you get to know the things that are important to them, the things that they value, and the kind of legacy they want to leave for their families and the charities they care about. And then you work with them to develop a plan to kind of leave that legacy behind. And
is that then young people? Is that more people at the end of their life, or older people, or how should I say?
Older, I would say either maybe starting mid-career to people who have retired, and helping them kind of plan out, post work life, I would think, and what they want that to look like, and how they, they want the resources to be able to take care of themselves, but then also take care of their families after they're gone. But I think the critical thing is it only works if you get to know them and what their intentions are and what they value. And I think that's definitely informed the work that I've done in IT. You know, it comes back to that. I never really thought about that a whole lot, but it probably does inform that, why I was so adamant, like, no, I have to go talk to the person who needs to use this thing, because I really need to know why they care about it or what their pain points are. And it probably, you know, that was probably influenced by that prior career. I need to know what they care about.
I hear a lot about this is very outcome driven. It's not output driven. It's really outcome driven, because of course they wanted to work for their family when they're gone, or to work for, like you say, the money should work on its own in one way or another. It's also a very interesting career to have, or a start of a career to have as a young person, I can imagine, because you talk to people who are, like you say, thinking about post-work life. So they discuss how they want to work. And I can imagine as a young person that it's really, it can be inspiring. It might be also frightening, but it can also be inspiring to think already at that time, what does that mean post-work life, and how to deal with money issues and stuff like that. Did that also inspire you somehow, or what influence that had on you?
I think it did. I think it's really funny that you've honed in on that almost immediately, because people ask me, how did you make that jump? And I can think of an exact moment where I would get very close to my clients. Again, when you're talking to them about the lifetimes that they, you know, their savings and the sacrifices they made, and their family members, and the causes that they care about, you really get to know them. And I share this story with some people. I hope people don't find it offensive, but I was working with one client, and I got to know her so very well, and I really adored her. And we kind of got all of her accounts, you know, to the place they needed to be. All of her goals were going to be met and everything. And she said, "This is great. Now I just need to die." And to your point, I think I was about 28 at the time. And I was like, wow, I need to go.
That's the only thing left.
This is fantastic. So it was, you know, like you said, it was outcome driven. I definitely had played a role in helping this woman kind of achieve her goals for this lifetime and after she was gone. And maybe, as I was approaching 30, probably that was a bit much for me. So
I can imagine. I've met many different times, and well, I don't know, and but from the story, it doesn't sound like she was ill or something. It just sounds like she was just very rational, thinking about what happens next. And I can imagine that people at a later stage in their life really think about, okay, I just want to get this in order before I die, and it's their way of saying, okay, now I'm at peace, and everything it's fine. But sometimes they can blurt out some of these sentences that are very strange for young people, I would say.
I never shared that with her, but she would probably, actually thinking about it, she probably would laugh if she knew that was my, like, I gotta, you know, it probably did give me that perspective of, I want to make sure that the things I'm doing matter. And that idea of even having a legacy. So I'm going to work for a while. I'm to be sure, I'm not done working in my life right now. But even the last few years, I've been thinking about that. What do I want to leave behind? I've had a lot of people serve as mentors for me and guides for me. And I've learned so much from so many people in this industry. And I want to make sure that I'm returning the favor for people who are coming in now. And I think that did probably make me mindful of that, of what my legacy might be.
Paying it forward, what you've learned from the people on whose shoulders you're standing, and that's what I'm hearing, which is indeed, I think, a nice goal. And so I can definitely hear how that whole experience had a big influence on you. So that's for sure. So let's move to that second question. And you kind of already talked about a different role, but if you had not been doing what you've been doing now, was there something else you were destined to become? Maybe that's that attorney, the role that you had, but maybe there was something else when you were young or whatever.
It's a good question. I get that question a lot of like people. I feel like people ask all the time that question. If you could do any job in the world, like you have to have a job, but if you could do any job, what would you do? And honestly, I love my job. I love being a coach. I love working with teams. I'm actually, as a consultant, I'm in with a team right now working as a product manager. I love dropping into different environments and learning how they work and getting to know the people there and what goals they have and maybe play a part in helping them achieve those goals. So I actually would just choose the job I have. I'm very fortunate, and don't get me wrong, I get frustrated the way everybody else does. It's not always, sunshine and puppy dogs, but I love the work that I do. So, but I would say I think that, barring the other story, I enjoyed the work of an attorney as well. It's a problem solving, it's a role, it's a creative role. I like that. I think if I, just completely stopped out of working in IT or working as a coach and I were to go back to that, I think the problem I might like to most tackle if I went back to being an attorney are immigration issues. There's a lot that's made of that in the United States. Our immigration system, I'll just say our immigration system is broken and it needs some attention. And I think that's become acutely apparent to me working in IT. And we rely so much on workers from all around the world, whether they're remote to us or they're coming to the United States to work. And our immigration system is not always very supportive to those people. So,
yeah, it's not supportive for people who are coming from Europe, let alone from other countries and non-Western countries. So it's definitely an issue. We've seen a lot of strange things happening over the past few years, I would say. So there's definitely things that are broken, and I think it's just in the United States. I think it's a little bit broken everywhere these days, maybe a little worse in the United States with whatever happened with your previous president. But there is definitely stuff going on. And it made me realize you just talked about it going back. I stopped you at some point when you were talking about swapping roles. So you never had the chance to finish that. Is there something else you wanted to add about why you moved out of that role?
Yeah, I think I wanted to just explore something different, kind of the story that I told. And I was even looking then at like what of that skill set, what might I do next? I looked at a couple of sort of philanthropic roles, like I might go work for a nonprofit and help with their development teams. But I'd also, the firm that I worked with, we were a large financial planning firm, so much so at that time the software that those kinds of companies would use were still all standalone. They were not web-based in any way, but we were large enough that we were having input in what the new system designs might look like or new features that were brought into those systems. So that was a role that I played even in our financial planning firm, was to suggest new features, and then and to be sort of a beta tester when they would come out. So someone suggested to me, that actually you might just flip over to the other side of the house and be on the side that is developing those things and starting to define them. So I think that probably influenced me as well, of like, if I'm over here on the IT side, I absolutely have to go talk to the user because I was that user. So when people would come to me and say, what do you need it to do? How do you do your job today? And what's your pain point? I came into IT with that expectation. Of course you go to people and say, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Because before people came to you, and that's what made you make the switch. Actually, that's so. I'm glad I had that extra question, because that is an important part of it. And yes, you're right. When I ask this question, the second question about what could you been doing, I think most people here on the show, they really love what they're doing now, and it's more like exploring the past. Were there other things that were in there in the past that they could have done, or that they were so-called destined to do? But I think most people are really happy, even if it's a plan or not planned, that they're working in the role that they're working. I think even if that could mean that, because if you talk about IT, you've been already in multiple kind of roles into IT. So coach might be the current thing that you're doing or coaching people, but it might move a little bit more in the future as well. But I do feel that coaching is an important part of whatever you're doing, because but it feels that, well, basically, even as an attorney, if you're helping people, it was also kind of coaching on giving them advice. This is what you need to do. They still needed to do it themselves. You couldn't sign the documents for them, or they had to. They still had to do the thing. So it was maybe less coaching, more consulting, but still there was, they were still in the driving seat, I would put it.
That's exactly how I see my role as Agile coach as well. Like typically when I'm hired, it's because an organization is experiencing something that they want to be different, and they're maybe not clear of themselves how to get there. And part of why I am hired and why I work for a consulting firm, part of why I get hired. That was my dog. I don't know if you just heard that.
I heard that. I wasn't sure what that was, but that's fine. It's interesting. I'm glad that I know it's a dog.
Yeah, she goes into like her wolf howl when she gets into a deep sleep. So that sorry about that. She's very relaxed. So when my consulting firm gets hired, it's because someone's experiencing something that they want to be different, and they don't necessarily know how to get there. So I find we come in, get to know them, and then talk them through a variety of options. I tend to lean toward what are some incremental changes we might make to get you closer to the thing you've said is your goal. But to your point, I can't do it for them. I can do some activities. I can offer training. I can offer rationales behind the different options or things, but a lot of it I can't do for them. I can't be the manager who has a reaction when something happens. Like that's on the manager to learn how to to interact with their teams or their individuals on their teams. So yeah, I do think they're very comparable in that way.
Yeah. I don't want to go too much into that. What I've learned as a consultant is that depending on where the client is, how much they know about Agile, I might need to give them more. So if they're completely new, I might say, okay, this is the thing you need to do. Just give one option, because if I give too much options in the beginning, they freak out. When they have a little more experience, I just give them 3 options and say, okay, I explain the 3 options and I say, this is probably the best for you, but it's up to you. And then when they're further, I give them 3 options and I let them decide. And when they're even more experienced, I ask them about options and okay. And so that's a little bit more complex than what you say, but in the end, it's that same thing. They still have to do it, independent of who took the decision on where they are. I've noticed, I'm telling this story because what I did when I first was coaching, I was only doing that last part, and I didn't do that first part. And when I had clients who were very new, they really felt not supported enough, because they were like, oh, we totally don't. You give us 3 options, but you don't tell me what's the best. Well, yeah, sometimes it's hard for me to know, but I've realized over the years that if they have totally no experience, it doesn't help them. So it might be better if I give them the options, but then tell them this is the best thing for you. Even if it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Sometimes when they're really starting, they just need to have some more guidance on this is what you need to do. And then if, of course, we need to be there to support them and say, okay, maybe I was wrong. And if that's something else. But I've noticed that, yeah, it's very tempting to talk about agile coaching and tell, okay, we give them all the options, but depending on how far they are in their agile journey, they might need a little more guidance or even a little more steering, I would say. A little bit like a child, and a 3-year-old, you don't talk about it in the same way as you do a 16-year-old. Definitely, and vice versa. If I would talk to my 15-year-old like she's 3-year-old, she would definitely not agree at anything. But the opposite is true as well. If you have a 3-year-old and you give them all the options and let them decide, that's not going to work, and let them put on their clothes on their own, that's not going to work. You need to give them a lot more guidance, and so that's a little bit. So yeah. Sorry, I'm mumbling on, but I think I wanted to add it because I've noticed that was a problem in the past with me. Anyway, I wanted to move to that next question for you. What is currently your biggest challenge, or at least the challenge that you want to share?
Yeah, I think recently a challenge that's I don't know that it's just cropped up, but maybe for whatever reason I've become more aware of it. In the consulting world, I see companies requesting a solution, or they've already solutioned and they're coming asking for who can provide X. And something we're adamant about in my world with the team that I'm a part of in my consulting firm is that there's no one solution that would solve every problem. And often we find that there's been very little analysis as to why that solution was chosen. It's often more like, I've heard of this solution, we have a problem, I think, let's try and see if that will fix it. So we often are trying to back people up and say, first can tell us about the assessment that you kind of did to arrive at the solution. And if they haven't done that, we want to do part of that. But driving home, to me, the challenge is kind of combating that notion that there is one solution. We see things in our industry all the time that are marketed as the solution. If you just do this, then it will fix all of your problems. And that's one of the firm kind of lines I will draw in the sand. There's no such thing as a one size fits all solution.
I think I heard Jutta Eckstein say that one size fits no one, really.
Yeah.
And that's basically it's it. If I would buy a T-shirt for me or for my partner, we're different sizes, so that definitely would not work. And either it will be too small for one of us and too big for the other one, and it would not work. And I think it's the same thing for solutions. And I agree. A lot of clients, have trouble with that, and so they come with us, and basically they want a silver bullet. They want to have an agile pill, and then give me the pill that I just need to swallow once, and then all my problems are gone, or wave that magic wand that will solve all my problems. Well, if that would have been, if it would have been that easy, you probably would have done it yourself already. That's part of the problem.
I tell people that all the time. There are thousands of videos on YouTube. There are hundreds of books that have been written. If it were that simple, someone would have written the book already. Someone would have published the YouTube video that solved everyone's problems. We'd all be doing it, and we'd be having fantastic results.
One way that I get asked that question is, we want to do Agile by the book. And then I point them to all the books behind me and I say, okay, which book? Because I have like 60 or 100 books about Agile that all contradict each other by design, because like you said, that book is written, but it's written for a specific problem in a specific industry, in a specific one or two companies. Because let's face it, most consultants that write a book, or most people that write a book about a solution, they've tried it in a few companies, at best in 50, because there's no way that someone could have tried it in 100 companies and really tried it for, let's say, a year or two. That's just impossible. And of course we have a few methods that have been tried in many companies by many different people, but there's not one size fits all. Even there you still need to tweak it and you need to adapt it. That's part of our method, that we say every 2 weeks we have a retrospective, or every X time we have a retrospective where we look and we improve what we're doing. I think that's the same for almost everything. And if it would have been indeed that simple, yeah, everybody would be doing it, and because of that, then by design it doesn't work anymore. So yeah, so but the second part of my question, so I really like that you bring it up because it's a big challenge that we have today. But that second part of that question is, why is that a good thing for you? Is there a part of it that's good for you?
So I'll say the sales part. Like I said, at my consulting firm, we actually work with a lot of companies that have been sold the idea that there is one size, there is one tool. Then they've tried it and it hasn't worked because it was not adapted to their environment. That process didn't include figuring out what was going on in the organization that impeded agility in the first place. So in their minds, they've tried it and it didn't work. They didn't get the outcomes they were seeking. So then they often talk to my company because we come in and say, this was never going to be something that was very simple. You have a large organization, you have a large system. There are many moving parts to it. There is no one solution, but we can help you identify what some of those impediments are and then work on changing those impediments or getting those impediments out of the way. So I would say from a sales perspective, that benefits my company quite a bit because we get people.
They've been through that. They've seen that it doesn't work. And so basically, to put it bluntly, they're asking your company to clean up the mess from the other companies. And so because, some people, and before when you were talking, I was thinking about Dr. Google, because sometimes people Google their symptoms and then they go to the doctor and say, this is my problem. And then the doctors, they basically have also to clean up the mess from the people that they've tried, and hopefully they didn't drug themselves and try a different solution, but they first go to a doctor. But unfortunately, it's also possible that they've seen the wrong kind of doctors that aren't helping them. And then that feels very similar, because then they come to you and they're actually in worse shape than they were before. And in sometimes, or at least I don't know what it's for you, but what I've seen is that sometimes the people in the company, they're now really worried, like, okay, but you said you want to do agile, but that other company was also saying they were doing agile, and they basically screwed me over because they just forced me to work one way. So it's it makes our life harder at that moment, I think. The sales part might be easier, but we still need to clean up the mess, I would say.
Right.
So that's,
it is more challenging, I think, to your point, sometimes too, than people, either there's some change fatigue because now they're being, they were asked to do something differently. Now that didn't in their minds work. So now they're going to be asked to do things differently yet again. So there's just some fatigue that can come with that. But then there's also this notion of like, well, we tried it, but it didn't work. So why are we going through this again? So that part is challenging. But I would say, for me, that's frustrating. But wow, if I can get to the other side for some of those organizations, it's so satisfying. Because then you really, then I know that I've really made an impact in that environment. But also when I start to see a team come together and self-organize and ask for what they need when maybe they didn't feel safe to do that in the past, or ask for some space to start experimenting and then actually start to experiment and learn, and you see that team come together. I say this all the time. I feel really nerdy about it, but I tend to fall in love with teams like that, right? Like I'm just so amazed at what they learn to do together, and it's energizing, and it's fun to know that I even played a small role in it.
And is it then easy, because you say you fall in love with these teams? Is it then easy to let them go? Because if you're in love with a team, it's hard to leave them. I can imagine.
Right, it's hard, and it's hard to. I would say that's one of the harder things as a consultant sometimes, and you tend to go places for a certain period of time, and then when you're done, you do have to sort of walk away. And I do, I'm very lucky in that I've been able to maintain some professional relationships with clients in the past, and sometimes get asked back to do some other work for them. But a lot of times you have to walk away, and then you're hoping for the best for them. It doesn't always happen. I have a client right now that I was with about 5 years ago, and I'm hearing things that are happening there, how the kind of what we were doing, which again wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, there's always an opportunity for improvement, but things were working pretty well, and it sounds like that's all kind of completely fallen apart, and it kind of breaks my heart that's happened. Decisions were made along the way, and people have left the company because of it, and it makes me sad. But
I can imagine. Yeah, I've sometimes heard that people say that people like us who are helping out in an agile consultancy, of an agile coaching, that we're kind of how do you call it, masochistic, because we join a team when things are really going bad, and when things are going better, even not perfect, like you say, they're improving, but they're on their way to do it on their own, then basically we have to leave them, because that's what we need to do, because if we stick around too long, they would become too much dependent on us. So that is kind of masochistic, because we stick around, we are there when things are bad, and when things are going better, then we say, okay, now we need to go. So it's
now
really
I gotta
kind
go
of
find somebody else who's in the rough,
yeah
and help them out. Yeah,
so
it's true. It's kind of perspective. But I will say, for every one of those, like I've had other experiences where I see former clients just out and about, and them telling me what they've managed to accomplish and keep going is really, really inspiring. I've had people come to me like well after the fact, and tell me, we're still doing it, and this is, these are the additional things we've implemented, and it's all going really well, and we all love it, and they're really, really excited to like share with me how they kept it going, and fortunately there are more of those than the disappointments, so that's good.
So that's good indeed. Okay, and that kind of thing brings me to that next question, because I feel a lot of passion when you're talking about this, and I feel a little bit that what drives you is the fact that you can help these teams. But for me, the question about what drives you is even more the question behind. Do you know where that drive is coming from? Do you know what made you do these kind of things? Is there anything that you know about that?
I think kind of even going back to our earlier question, thinking about my legacy. I know a few years ago, I actually started to get really serious about even putting that to paper, thinking about what I wanted my legacy to be, because I'm, like I said, I'm not done working, but I'm probably in the second half of my career. And what do I want to be leaving behind for other people? What impact do I want to have had? And that got me really thinking about my firm belief that it is possible to run a company, make a profit, and still have that appreciation that it is being run by human beings. It is completely populated by human beings. I kind of chose the tagline in my LinkedIn profile, bringing humanity to the workplace, because I don't think it's always existed. And I in many places it doesn't today, but reminding ourselves that at work, we're humans. There used to be that adage of, no, you leave your personal self at the door. And at the very least with knowledge work, when the commodity we are marketing is our brain, you cannot leave your humanity at the door. You have to bring your whole self to the door, because it's your whole self that's been hired. It's your brain that's been hired to do this knowledge work. So I think bringing that notion that we need to take care of people holistically in the workplace is something that I am passionate about. And that I would say that encompasses a lot of the work that I do. Getting out of this mindset that people are just widgets to be plugged in places. No, you have to actually think about them as individuals, two individuals that on paper can look almost identical. They're the same age, same school, same years of experience, whatever. They're still different people, and they think differently, and they're not interchangeable. They're not fungible. I think if there's a lasting impact I could have on our industry, it would be that, along with just recognizing people as human beings and everything that human beings need in order to be successful. So I would say that does drive me. It drives me in the work I do with organizations. It drives me in the work I'm doing even internally with our consulting firm, working to ensure that we're creating the best environment, or we're ensuring that we have the best environment for our consultants to be successful. And that means taking care of them completely as humans.
It's interesting that when you think about when so before, well, ages ago we had, I don't know how it's called, the department for personnel, for employees. They turned it into, they started to use the name HR, and HR, the stories that I heard from the people who were there when they introduced that, the idea of using that name, human resources, was actually to bring the human side into work. Unfortunately, that backfired completely because we think much more of them as resources than as humans. But what I've always heard is that the idea was to actually talk with humans and to actually think about them much more as humans. And so, like I said, it's backfired because we see that much more on the other side. But apparently that was a lofty goal that they tried to do, or at least in some of the companies in Belgium, when I heard people talking about it, that was their idea of changing that name. Of course, we both know how that totally doesn't work, because they look much more as fungible resources, like you say. But yeah, it's that human side, and you're completely right. There are companies, and even I've worked in companies where we were told that we had to leave our emotions at home, and you need to be professional, whatever that means. And for me, it's the complete opposite. The more you suppress your emotions, the more they will become visible in your work, and
Right.
It's the complete opposite. We need to respect people for their full peopleness and their full humanness, and then they will bring their full everything, their full knowledge, but also their full capacity. And so thank you for doing that, because that's indeed a very lofty goal, and very thing that can drive you. I still want to dig a little bit deeper. Do you have any idea where that spark came from? Is that really from that first job that you did that was about creating a legacy for your clients, or is that something earlier or somewhere else in your life, or is that too detailed as a question?
I don't know. It's probably a combination of those two, and then my those early experiences I know that there can be a tendency in kind of the agile world to talk about sort of waterfall ways of thinking with a lot of disdain. And I think for myself, if it comes from that, there's those practices we talked about before that, for those of us even in the middle of them, didn't seem to make logical sense. The example of like working, and then you throw something over the wall and you don't even get to talk to the people who are executing on it. It doesn't seem
make
logical.
any sense.
Yeah, when I talk to younger people today who are newer to the workforce, they're like, why did anybody ever think that was a great idea? Good question. And then those of us in the middle, we're asking the question too, but it's the way that we worked.
They wanted to optimize us and make sure that it was fully efficient, and whatever somebody thought about it.
Yeah, so I think for anybody who kind of lived through that, and then when we talk about that environment with a bit of disdain, I know of myself, like I can feel myself physically kind of bristle against that. Like you were just saying that, like, I need to optimize every hour of your day to make sure that you are fully utilized. And we still hear that kind of language. And the problem in my experience that creates is it takes the focus off the outcomes, off the value that's going to be derived by whatever it is we're doing, and puts it more on that bureaucratic side of things, of like making sure that every hour of the day is squared away. And if you happen to have 30 minutes of free time, I've got to figure out how to fill that for you, because, as a manager, I have to figure out how to fill it for you, because otherwise you'll waste it, something, that kind of underlying notion. And I think living through that and seeing that, and just knowing that that's not how humans work, especially in this creative field we are in. I mean, most of us are, if you're working in IT, you are in a creative field. And the way that human brains work, we need thought space. You cannot have every second of your day filled with a specific activity and then be successful. You're not going to have enough time to think through the creative problem solving that you need to do. So I think just kind of witnessing that firsthand probably is the thing that kind of raised that passion in me. Just fixing
so
that,
you felt it yourself that there was tendency for the people around you and the companies around you to optimize your time, where you actually would say that was not optimizing the results at all. So that was just optimizing the time I was used, but not the results. And I do agree. I see a lot of companies where they still kind of mix up efficiency and effectiveness, and there's actually so I'm in Belgium. There's 3 official languages, and one of them is French. And in French, the word efficiency and effectiveness, there are 2 different words of it, but most people use just one word that basically means the both of them, and which for French people then makes it really hard to see that difference. Because and well, not just the French people, I think everybody around the world, there is a lot of tendency. If I ask people about when they use the word efficiency, and when I ask them very specifically, you want efficiency or effectiveness, they would always say effectiveness, but make it efficient as well. It's like, yeah, but if you're very efficient running in the wrong direction, it's actually better to stop running and look for the right direction and take a minute. But of course, if you're running, people will keep shouting, keep running, instead of don't stop watching where you're going. Well,
I'm going to go on a limb here and state this for anyone who is listening. Any like a development team you are working with, they're always going to look for the most efficient way to do something.
Yes.
That is the nature of developers, of engineers. They are constantly problem solving and seeking to do things more efficiently. So to achieve a task with fewer resources or less time or whatever, they're always going to be so. You don't necessarily need to do that for them.
No, I would say it backfires. That you actually need to do the opposite. You need to tell them, like, wait a minute. I know about a team. I heard a story about a team where there were a bunch of students. This is like a 20-year-old story that I heard about a bunch of students, and they were working on a Unix type of system. So they were optimizing stuff, and their professor was out to a conference, and so they had finished their task, and they were looking like, okay, what could we do better? What could we improve? And so they had no idea. So they just looked at what function is used most in our operating system. And so they found that system, they found that function, and then they halved the time that function was doing. So they were really happy that they said, okay, now this thing is doing it twice as fast. But they had no idea what that function was doing, because their professor comes back and they say it, and they're really proud, like, okay, we did. And so the professor starts to smile and says, okay, have any idea what this function is doing? No, not really. It felt kind of strange. Yeah. Okay, but you made it twice as fast. It's used all the time. So is your computer running faster? Interesting. We didn't think about it. It doesn't seem to run fast. Have any idea why? No. Okay. Well, the function you just optimized was the idle function. So that was the computer doing nothing. So it's now doing twice as fast nothing. So I have no idea how true that story is, but it so reminds me of what you just said about developers. They're really good at optimizing stuff. So you don't need to have them look for that. They will do that automatically. And I think most humans will do that. So and somehow managers or people around people, they will keep wanting to optimize things. And no, we're, like you say, we're in a creative world. We need to sometimes think what is it? And yes, I think it was Ken Beck that says, okay, we need to first solve it, solve the problem, then make it good. And only when we're really happy about that, then we can make it faster. And that's the kind of thing we need to go for. So we went into, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also don't want to sound like I'm disparaging managers or anything like that, but we have set up systems inside our organizations that encourage that that kind of behavior. We haven't always given managers the support and guidance they need to know what they should be doing. So they might default to like optimizing for efficiency, things like that, or we might actually have incentives or expectations on those managers that they manage those things, rather than maybe stepping back and looking at, you know, what influence can they exert to make the greatest environment for those creative thinkers to be successful in. So
yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because indeed
people,
it's really about what's the guidance we give to managers. And for a long time we didn't have any guidance, and we're still using systems from a long time. And just like these developers that want to optimize, these managers want to optimize. And let's face it, me as a parent, I want to do sometimes the same thing. I have teenagers, so it's very tempting to think about, okay, you need to optimize. Well, part of my job as a parent is to let them go and let them figure out on their own on how some of the things work. And that might mean that they will run into walls. And as long as nobody gets hurt and it stays kind of safe, it's probably for the best. And we need to give the same thing to developers. But like you say, it's very tempting to go there. And it doesn't really matter what role. I think a lot of us in humans, we want to optimize and go for efficiency. So it's definitely, I didn't want to sound as blaming, and I don't think you wanted to sound as blaming. It's good that you mentioned that. Okay, we moved in all kind of directions, and we talked already about lots of things that you've done in your life. So what do you consider your biggest achievement? And let's maybe even start with the question before. Is that easy for you to say what is your biggest achievement? Because for some people here, it's really a hard question, and others like, no, I have no problem finding it. Is that easy for you to say?
Yeah, I think that's the easier question. No, I don't think it's easy for me to say that. Probably like a lot of other people, I'm pretty hard on myself. So when I think of like, oh, you know, something I've achieved,
so the bar is high. The bar is high for yourself.
The bar is high, but there are things, you know, definitely kind of hardships or hard things that I struggled through and got through to the other side. So I've definitely done those things. You know, going through school to be an attorney, passing the bar exam. Those are things I'm, you know, not
that
simple.
Exactly. That's not simple for most people.
Yeah. I think professionally, just that those, it's just those times when I've done something and then I kind of find out after the fact that I did have a positive impact. Those are the things that I consider my biggest achievement. If I helped someone else see in themselves what they're capable of, and they can sort of achieve a goal that they had, then I consider that a personal achievement.
So, and what I heard earlier on is that when they call you back 5-10 years later, when they keep talking about what they've achieved on their own, then I don't know the exact words you said earlier on, but it makes you smile just thinking about, okay, I've made a difference in their life. I left some legacy there. So that's
we have plenty of days that, you know, I get to the end of the day and I'm thinking, what even did I do today? Or I feel like we went backwards somehow. There's plenty of days like that. And so to get, you know, every once in a while, get those signals that you supported someone in a very positive way, that makes it worth it.
Yeah, I always tell people I give free lifetime support. So on whatever I do, if it's just an email or if I work 2 months with you, you can just call me back, send me a text message or an email, whatever, even if it's 10 years later. Just ask me for another question. I'll just gladly help you. And one of the things I've discovered along the way is that that's a great source of hearing back from people. And then, and sometimes they have a very interesting question. Sometimes it's very easy for me to answer. Sometimes it's like, wow, they're already there. All kind of things. But it really is yeah, I'm gladly I offered this to people because it basically it feeds the energy back to me, because it tells me, okay, 10 years later they somehow still remember me for something I did. And sometimes it's profound for them, sometimes it's just one word I said that I don't remember anymore what I said, but whatever
Yeah.
reason, it has an impact on them. And that's indeed what is so nice for the people like us, that we hope that we change lives for the better, but it's hard. And the last year, well, no, not just the last year, since COVID, I tried to make how to call it, a habit out of calling people and telling people, sending emails like, you know what, that's when you made a difference for me. Or if I did a workshop and somebody smiled to me at the moment that I had difficulty finding words, that even stupid things like that, I think it's really important to give back that energy to anyone who's helped me in whatever way. And I think, well, I've noticed that I have for sure not done it enough in the past, and I think most of us, we don't do it enough. So I think
Right.
it's an
so funny you
important
mention
thing.
that. I was having a conversation with a colleague on Friday about this, where we were both, it was kind of randomly came up. We were talking about professors we had. We went to the same university, professors we had, 25 years ago, and we can remember things that they said to us now. And like the person I was referencing, like I can distinctly remember that advice that person gave me in my writing, that, and just making my writing better. And I don't know how to get a hold of that person, but if I could, it would be great to go back and say, you made notes on some paper that I wrote, but it was really helpful. And you said it in a way, you put it to me in a way that I had never heard before. And it had this impact. And she was saying the same thing. Like she had a professor who really encouraged her in CIS. And she's like, now that I look back, I actually, that helped shaped my career. And I was like, well, have you ever thought about reaching out to her and letting her know? She was like, well, it was 25 years ago. And I said,
You
I
never
don't
know.
know who would hate to get that, like if you could find her email. I don't know anybody who would hate to get that email saying, thank you for this small impact, this impact you had on me.
I think it's important. Yeah. While you were saying that story about writing, I remember the hard part is I don't remember which professor, but I had a professor. It's more a teacher that I had in high school. I think I was 13 or 14, but unfortunately I don't know which one. But I wrote an essay, and that teacher told me, like, Eve, you should read it, because you basically had, this is one page, a letter page, a real full page, and it's just one sentence. You only have a dot at the end of it, because you put in lots of sub sentences or whatever. And so it was unreadable for her. I didn't understand that remark at that time, but yeah, it's something that comes back in all my writing, that I see it. I see it when I read things for my children, that I say, well, you kind of use large sentences. So it definitely had a huge impact on me. And when you were talking about writing, that's the first thing that popped to my mind, like, wow, that's indeed a message I got that I didn't understand at the time. I was kind of mad that it was, yeah, but it makes sense. Even it's a large sentence, it makes sense. Of course, now today I'm like, no, if it didn't make any sense. I would love to read that page back, because it's probably just horrible. But and it was probably a big ego thing that I didn't see that message. But it's yeah, these are the kind of things that make an impact on you. It's very factual, because it was just like, okay, there's just one sentence in a large chunk of text. And yeah, even if I didn't understand it at the time, it had a big impact on me. So that's the kind of thing where teachers can make so much an impact if they put it in a way with respect. And even if I didn't understand it, it was, I still think it was said with respect, because I did listen. I didn't hear it in the correct way, because I refused to understand it, but I definitely did hear it. And I think that's so important, coming back to what you said earlier on about respect for humans. If we give feedback to people, but we tell it with respect, but it's okay, then that has a huge impact on people.
Right.
And like you said, even 25 years later, that's
Yeah. You mentioned something else about like even people who have kind of given me ideas for how to say things or how to express an idea. I look, um, I'm fortunate to have had interactions with. I can think immediately Esther Derby, Johanna Rothman, Diana Larson, like all of them at some point have kind of helped. They've given me language to maybe describe a challenge I was facing or how I was feeling about a challenge, and in a way that I had not been able to articulate, but they've kind of given me a way to think about it and a way to articulate it. They're just kind of unstuck me. So I'm very thankful for that. Just those conversations I've had with them over the years.
You mentioned three women that had huge impact on myself as well. I've been to PSL with Joanna and Esther. Diana, I had multiple conversations. Johanna, I wrote something with her that she had real impact on my writing as well. But all three at multiple stages had huge impact. So definitely, I assume on many people in the industry. So yeah, I'm not surprised that you were also touched by these women and their, I don't know how to say, their words or their wisdom and things like that, because that's the kind of impact that I see with them on many different people. And also sometimes not just I don't want to go too much into detail because I saw a few of them in workshops at conferences interacting with other people, and I've learned so much also about how they dealt with the problem, with that person, with the whole environment, just respecting it, making space, making safety for whatever's happening. Also sometimes even, I would say, stopping the story if they felt like, okay, wait a minute, we're in an open conversation now with a conference with many people around us, so maybe we don't want to go that deep into this issue because you might feel safe because we're talking here, but we have to keep remembering that there may be 20, 30 people around us. So do you still feel safe on talking about that? And just these kind of interactions make a huge impact, or made a huge impact on me, and I assume also on the people where I saw this happen. So thank you for sharing that, because it's indeed, you just mentioned three names. We can probably all list 10 or 20 more people that had such an impact. But yeah, it is important. We're always standing on the shoulders of others. And talking about what we learn from others, that actually kind of brings me automatically a tip. Is there anything that you want to share, a personal agility tip that you want to share with the people who are listening in?
I think when I'm encountering any kind of personal challenge, so outside of official work stance, I often forget kind of the principles and tenets that we live by in the agile world, but then find that I'm very well served by them if I just bring it back to that. If I can share kind of a personal story, since kind of 2019, throughout 2019 through 2021, I was dealing with a cancer diagnosis and went through a long, the first time was about 14 months of treatment, and everything went well. I was actually feeling quite well through the whole thing. But I just had to do it, and I just had to get through it. And if I think of that, that notion that strife in our life is really just us wanting things to be different than the way they are, and unaccepting of that fact that, I have strife because I want things to be different, when sometimes I just need to accept that they are the way they are at the moment. And where I might have some influence, maybe there is something I can do to make things a little bit better. Simply dwelling on the fact that things are not the way I want them to be isn't going to solve anything. It's not going to make the strife go away. It's going to make the strife work, actually. But I think what really brought this home for me, I was kind of, probably about halfway through the roadmap of treatment that was planned. And I was just getting frustrated. Like I said, I was doing pretty well. I was feeling okay. And I just wanted it to be over. That's all it was.
Damn it, can't you just go faster?
Right. Just want to go faster and get to the other side so I can get on with my life. But at that moment, completely unrelated, I had the most wonderful conversation with Mark Kilby and April Jefferson. And we were talking about open space. And, what impact has open space had on me? I'm a huge proponent of open spaces, and I found great value in them. And that was one of the questions. So, like, what are how have the tenets of open space maybe impacted you in the rest of your life? And I started thinking, that they actually are quite beneficial and supportive. I was thinking, especially, it really got to me when I came back around to like whoever shows up are the right people. Mm-hmm. I was also so fortunate as I was going through this whole thing. I had so many people just show up and check in and offer whatever support. And those are the right people, right? The people who are there, and they're like your cheerleaders, and you might not even know they're there, but they're cheering you on from afar. So I think about things like that when I have any kind of a challenge, try to remind myself, like, what are some of the tools and the principles that I have at my disposal to get through this. So
it's interesting that you bring the thing about the cheerleaders and whoever shows up, because when you talked about the principles from open space, I was thinking about the first thing that popped into my mind was, okay, whatever happens is the right thing. That the only thing that could have happened. And like, exactly. Yes, you want things to go faster, but and sometimes we have that also in open space. That like, some of that discussion, it kind of drags along, and why can't we just chase it to the real part of the discussion? And we have the same thing with agile transformation. Sometimes you think like, okay, been through this for the first, this is already the third or the second or the 10th client that has that same problem. I just know how to solve it. Let's just go directly to the end. But it doesn't work that way. And even I can imagine for a doctor that has a cancer treatment, he can also say, okay, now I've cured 100 patients. Let's just go to the end. Well, no, you first need to go to all of these treatments, and you cannot double the treatment, because part of the treatment is they give you basically things that kill part of your body. Right. So if they would double the treatment, you would die. Right. So you really have to have the right amount of treatment to just kill enough of your body to actually kill the bad parts and not kill the good parts of your body.
Yeah, so it's a great analogy for sometimes you have to do things incrementally. The only way to get the overall outcome is to go through it incrementally. There are different steps. You could roadmap it. The roadmap might have to change along the way, even depending on what you learn along the way, but you have to do a little bit and see what happens, and then do a little bit more and see what happens, and adjust along the way.
Wow. So thank you for sharing, because that's we kind of, we talked on, and we very deep, but at the same time, not it doesn't sound tough. I mean, you're pretty loud, open about it, but light about it, because I can imagine that 2 years ago that was completely different, that you were in a different space. But right now, it seems that it's really past not just pure technical, but also just from a mindset point of view. It sounds like you left it behind already. Is that a correct statement?
A bit. I also, after that was completed, unfortunately, it returned a few months later. So I had to go through another, a different set of treatments and got through that. Hopefully right now it's gone forever, but
you need, what is it, 5 or 10 years before they can officially diagnose you as it's gone.
But it's funny you mentioned that, because I can't remember exactly when, but you had mentioned Christopher Avery before. And I would say that kind of responsibility process thinking played a huge role in it for me, because it's that fundamental tenet. I can't always choose what's happening to me, but I can choose my reaction to it.
Yes.
So
indeed.
And again, I don't at all mean to imply that I didn't have bad days. I remember one time I was at treatment and I was just in tears because my doctor even was like, well, I thought something would be different, but it's not. So, okay. And but it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad thing. But I think in the moment, I was just all my frustration of, I just want this to be over. And I, just wanting to be done with it. And something, I don't even remember what he said, but it was something, words he chose that day. And my reaction was not great. Like I was just angry and upset and frustrated and all that. But then recognizing that and talking myself back of like that, that kind of reaction doesn't solve anything. It only seeks to make me feel worse. And then when you talk about like in that whole kind of like that whole space, you definitely feel like so much is out of your control. So I think finding something that can be within your control, which is always your reaction to things, it can be empowering to just say, this is how I am choosing to react. There are times I would, like when I was feeling particularly frustrated or something, I will set a timer. Like I'm going to set the timer on my phone for 15 minutes and I'm allowed to be angry for 15 minutes.
Okay, wow. Talking about being very efficient and so right. Well, if it's working, that's really great, because I think that's one thing I wanted to bring back. Like for example, in retrospectives, we want people to focus much more on solving problems, but from time to time, a team just needs to vent, and hopefully not every retrospective, and hopefully not too much. But yeah, sometimes, like you say, you need to be angry, and just allowing you to be angry, even if it's just for 15 minutes, might be better than to hit yourself on the head. I was angry again, because then you're even in the negative space of being in a negative space, and then it doesn't help. I wanted to go a little bit deeper also on the fact you said, okay, the doctor said something strange. Do you feel that in general, because we're talking about treating people as humans, do you feel in general that you were treated as a human person in hospital?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. And that is something, when I talk to other people who have gone through something similar, I would say in general, that's where we have the greatest amount of greatest opportunity for improvement, aside from here in the US, figuring out how we pay for things and who pays for things. So set aside that problem. But we have a tremendous opportunity for improving how we interact in the medical field with people as humans. And those two things are tied together though, because I should say, I always felt like I got great care. I felt like I was heard. I felt like I had a way of asking questions. I had an outlet to get information. But I had to work on it. And it's not just like.
And when you say work on it, is that because you're a good communicator and a good facilitator, that you kind of knew how to ask the right questions? Is that what I should hear you say?
I think that's what it is. Like I knew that, like, if I had a question, it was on me to go find someone to answer it, to reach out and get the answer. I worry that not everybody knows that they have that ability, or they have that freedom to, like, it's okay to ask your doctor, no, back up and explain to me what is happening, or back up and explain to me why I'm doing this action versus this action. We don't always feel like we have the freedom inside our care system. I feel like there are, what's funny is I feel like there are healthcare organizations that are starting to look into that, about how we treat people holistically. Like there are some other things we can do while people are receiving physical care. We can, there's a whole mental health care that should go along with this. And we're just now getting to that place of, making that a part of a whole holistic treatment package, suggesting mental health resources for someone who is going through something traumatic like this. It's not everywhere. It's not automatic. And in a lot of places, I think if those resources are available, the patient has to know to ask for them. The patient has to say, I'm kind of depressed. I'm going through cancer treatment. What can I do about that? I don't think doctors necessarily have the time to slow down and ask those questions. I will say my oncologist was very good about asking, just no, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are you doing? Having said that, he's also someone who's won awards for at places he's worked he's known for his patient care. So I think that kind of like he's the exception probably to the rule. But I think at least in our system in the United States, doctors just often don't have time. Like they've got to see so many patients they don't have time to slow down and say, you don't see your chipper self today. How are you doing?
Yeah, there's so many reactions I have to that story. I've seen it and so many things. So one of the advices I heard for people who are in maybe not that hard situations you are, but similar kind of situations where when you have a doctor coming to your room when you're in the hospital, you should really write down all your questions and make sure, and every time they say something, write down something, because you might want to have other questions, or maybe you want to have someone with you who understands actually the logo that the doctor is using, the phrases, because some of that is just things that we don't understand. And yeah, definitely the part that you say they're so much optimized for time. It really makes me think. Well, I have a friend who said he had a daughter who had not a large problem, but between having the problem, going to make an appointment to the doctor, and then finally having the right treatment, there was like 9 months, and there was like 4 or 5 visits in between. And then every time this is just a 15-minute visit with one part of the hospital, and then the next month or 2 months later, do you have the next appointment, and because everything is so optimized for that hospital. And the whole time is like he said that he was there for his daughter, and I think in these 9 months they only had like less than 2 hours of actual physical seeing a doctor and talking to someone who's from the hospital, but the whole time period was 9 months because of the optimization on doctor's time and not on patient's care. And of course, if it's not a big problem, like in his case, that's probably okay, even if it's very frustrating for him and his daughter. But if you have a problem and it takes them too long, it's just insane. And as a and also the way you described it very nicely about how you've been treated. My godfather got cancer like, I don't know, 40 years ago or something like that. And I still remember one story about that he was in a meeting room with his doctor, actually with a bunch of doctors, and they were discussing his case. Patients, whatever, with a number. So let's say patient 358, and they were just discussing the case, and he was in the room, and they never ever mentioned his name. They were always discussing patient 358. Until one point, he just got fed up with it and said, okay, patient 358 is leaving the room, and he just left, because he was like, come on, you're not even talking with me. You're not even mentioning my name. And there is, of course, an efficiency part, because if you just make sure you talk if you use that number, you make sure that you talk about the right patient's file and whatever. So there is good parts of it. But if you do that with the patient in the room, it's kind of, it's
very
insane.
simple for someone to acknowledge
exactly, and
their name, right?
And just even ask, is this correct? Do you recognize this? And why was he even there? Because they never spoke with him, so it was very strange. I unfortunately I don't know what happened afterwards. Just that one part, but it brings it for me. It so much shows a little bit what you just said, is that the doctors treat you somehow as a number. They don't take care of you as a person, and if they don't ask you, and if you are not as good as a communicator as you are, you might not tell them like, oh well, today I have a little bit, oh well, you should have said it before. Well, you never asked. And that's and especially because every how would I say it? Every profession has their own kind of words that the rest of us we don't understand. We have the same thing in agile. We have the same thing in IT. Lawyers have certain kind of things, and it's normal and it helps us. It speeds things up. If we talk about retrospectives, both of us we know what kind of meeting we're talking about, so we don't need to explain it. But of course, if my daughter is in the room, I need to explain a little more and not just say, oh, we just did the retrospective. Okay, she would not be able to understand it. And doctors have that same kind of tendency, I think. So thank you for sharing that, because it's been a real important thing for, first of all, in your life, but also showing that, okay, so basically what I heard you say is that even with things in my personal life, I need to look back at the things I'm doing in my profession and look at what parts are there that I can use to help me look back at that. So that's a very good tip that I think all of us, I definitely know I can use it, and there's definitely moments that I need to look back a lot more at that. So thank you for sharing. Let's move to that next question. And you were talking about that hard period, and that was partially during COVID. That's what I remembered. So I assume you also started working at some point remote working. But did you do any remote working, for example, before COVID?
Yeah, I had been working from home for a little over about a year and a half before COVID started. And so then I think, and I was with a company where many of us were remote. So we had kind of processes in place to sort of figure that out, but really like level the playing field as much as we could to make sure that everybody felt fully represented when we were, on conference calls and things like that. So it was interesting to kind of be doing that already and then watch other organizations sort of abruptly make the shift. That to me was the more eye-opening thing of like, oh, right, people haven't been doing this. Like people haven't heard of Zoom before. People haven't been using the call features inside Teams or whatever. So watching that was interesting. I think really just that, what have I learned? Yeah, more than ever, especially now that I see companies kind of going back or doing some hybrid version, almost like forgetting what we've learned over the last couple of years, which is, I think one of those critical rules is just wherever you can level the playing field. And what I mean by that is if someone has to be remote, if someone has to be online, everybody should be online.
Thank you for sharing that. That is probably the number one tip for remote work that a lot of people didn't understand before COVID. I mean, you whatever reason there was somebody remote, and they were always second level in the team. I mean, they were not taken seriously, and most people didn't even realize it. Yeah, we know it's kind of not good, the connection, but okay, this person is still there, so he or she should be happy that we bring him or her into the meeting remote. And it's like, but that's not it. And so now, so how do you do this? How do you level that field for everyone? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think the simplest is if you have some people who are co-located and some people are remote, then you still all call in and be, approximating remote. So to me, one of the worst is when you have a group of people in a conference room and then you've got another group of people online. I have never seen that fully work successfully, especially if you're trying to have a whole group conversation. Now, if there's some way that you can facilitate something with the people who are online, facilitate it separately for the people who are in the room, and then bring those things together, I still think you're still going to have some like whole group conversations, I would imagine, but trying to have that all together, I never see that work well.
So wait, because you very quickly said something about remote and online. Did I hear you say that you basically have a separate facilitator for the physical room and a separate
Yeah.
facilitator for the online people? Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think that might be the closest thing to get to like something that works there. But if
Mm,
it's, if we've got a group of people in a room and they're whiteboarding, and then you've got some other people who are online and they're like looking at a camera while someone's whiteboarding physically, that's rough. It's like you said, that there's always kind of that second tier status experience that's not great for anybody. You're not those people are trying to follow along who are online. It's hard for them to step in. It kind of a corollary to this we see to just when you and I have a conversation in person, we can react to our physical cues to one another as we're talking better than if we're online. It takes a little longer to read that online, or there's a bit of a delay regardless of how you're doing. So I find that that's one of the biggest problems with a whole group conversation online, is that it just takes longer. Like first, people have some thought time, and then they might need to come off mute, or they need to start speaking. Whereas if we were all in a room together, that transaction time would have just been smaller, shorter. So having some people who can have almost instantaneous communication, and then another group of people in the same conversation who are delayed, that's really what causes that problem.
Thank you for bringing that up, because indeed I had, when was it? I think about a week and a half ago, I did a workshop, and for whatever strange reason, I did the workshop a day earlier. The reason is not important, but unfortunately, that day earlier, just one team member was remote and was not physically there. And I only realized it at the moment that we started. So this was a training. We were supposed to do something together. And when we started, I realized, oh, okay, my other colleague is now not here. Tomorrow she would have been here, but for whatever reason, we don't do it tomorrow. I couldn't do it the next day. So we just discussed it with a few people, and we said, okay, let's do it today. Now we can rearrange our time. And we going into that meeting, we're starting, and then somebody shows up online and was like, oh, of course, Askana is not there. She's remote. And yeah, basically, it didn't work for her to be in that part. At some point we asked, okay, could you just be the observer? But even something very interesting happened. There was a small discussion between two people, and one person kind of felt, he made a joke out of it, but it was kind of strange reaction. And so he sat back just 10 centimeters back in his chair to say, like, okay, I leave you to have that discussion. So I'm pulling myself a little bit away. But yeah, that was completely invisible for the person who was remote. So I explicitly asked about that situation later on. So I said, did you see this person just giving back? And yeah, and like, okay, now if I do this 5 centimeters, you probably see it. But this was a person who was at the other side of the room, where the camera was. So it was really like already 4 or 5 meters in between. So I doubt you could have seen it. And she missed it. And I was not surprised. And I was like, yeah, but for us in the room, it was very visible that Luke did this. It was like, yeah, that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Huh? You miss all these clues. It's and even if I'm aware, if I took care of it, I was just taken away about, oh damn it, I didn't think about that person not being here today. And yeah, so okay, for that particular part, it was more like showing to my team a technique that I've learned. So it was most important that most of the team members knew what it was, so that, because basically what we want to do is in the future, we want to teach it with 2 people to another team. So I'll just need a few people who are able to do that, and we can bring them along with me, and then she can join as well later on to observe from a real thing. But it was just stupid that I didn't think about it up front, and it's so hard to and let's put it as a question. Do you think that hybrid, that there will be a time that we can make it work better than today?
I think just continuing to be mindful of how the interactions are going to take place. It's not as simple as, oh, now some of us can go back in the office, so we can do that and almost just go back to the way we were. I do think it's going to continue to be a problem. I don't think we're ever going to have a situation, for a variety of reasons, where everybody can go into the office. Now we're hiring more, at least here in the States, we're relying more on more physically remote people. So they're just not able to come into a location all the time. And also, I think one good side effect of this is, I'm hoping, is that we're more aware of when people are sick and they might have a communicable disease, that we just give them the space to be at home and not have to be in the office all the time. I hope that's a positive that comes out of the last 2.5 years. But and that stuff just crops up all the time, and last minute, unexpectedly. So we're going to have to figure out a way to do it. And I would encourage everybody really to start there. What can we do to make it as though everyone is having the same experience? Start with the level playing field. And it might not always be ideal, but start that with your goal. Start as that with your goal.
Thank you for bringing that up, and also bringing up the fact that basically it's not going to go away, because we're into a new normal for multiple reasons. Like you say, just looking at myself, when I felt a little bit ill, like just 5 years ago, I would still go to the office because I'm like, okay, I don't feel well, but I didn't really think about how that could affect other people. Thanks to COVID, I'm much more aware how the effects of just having a cold, how that can have an influence, and how that could be dangerous to other people. Because if you're just healthy people, that doesn't make a big difference. But if you're if people have whatever is going on in their lives that I might not know, that might be a big risk. And today I would just say, like, okay, I don't feel well, I'll just work, but I'll work remote, because I think it's safer both for me and for the other people. That's something that, I have to be honest, I wasn't thinking about 5 to 10 years ago, and I was just that's not good. That was not smart of me. But that's I didn't realize it, and I didn't think about it. And I think I see a lot more people that make that same remark and think like, okay, wait a minute, I feel okay. And even if it just means I need to lie down and during lunch break, that's also an option that I have when I work at home, and that might not be for others. So just taking care much more about myself. So that situation, it's not going away. You're completely right. And at the same time, we need to think about it, because let's face it, 20 years ago, we didn't do remote work and we felt like it's totally not possible to do it. We have much better tools. Well, this conversation, I remember in 2004, we talked just before when we were setting things up, we talked about Skype. I remember the beginning, the birth of Skype in 2004. Yes, it was possible to work remotely with Skype, but the quality of the webcams was just like horrible. I was like, if I would look back at it, it's probably would remind me of these video games like 30 years ago, where you have, that these were people, but you actually couldn't recognize people. Now you can actually see in this game, you not just only see that it's people, you can actually recognize which person it's supposed to be. It's the same thing with cameras, so it's a lot better. So we've learned a lot more, and now we need to learn for hybrid work. And like you say, we need to be very careful about a lot of that things. So thank you for bringing a lot of that up, because it's where there is still a lot of work, I would say, for
the only thing I was going to add is, I think it's interesting that there are some tools out there that are trying to think of that, like, workspace of the future and how to improve on that. I think of, like, the big one that comes to mind for me is Kiko Chat. And I know that now, especially through COVID, there are a number of other tools where they're trying to better approximate working in the same space. So I am eager to see what's going to happen in that space over the next 5 years or the next 10 years, especially as we, kind of navigate this hybrid space. But it's building that intentionality into communication tools.
Yeah, and I just before we talked also about the Agile Week that we're having at my current client, and I've learned so much about. We did breakout rooms with 200 people, and I've learned so much about how breakout rooms these days still don't work from a facilitator point of view. For certain things they work, but and I discussed this also with Diana Larson on this podcast about just a stupid thing, but if I'm doing a breakout in a physical room, I can just watch the space and feel which groups have what kind of energy. If a breakout room in Teams, if somebody from Teams or Zoom are listening to this, if I can just see in what breakout rooms, what's the noise level of a breakout room, it would be so much helpful. How much words are people are using, that the software can tell me so much, and it might be, oh, there is a heated discussion going on. That's maybe where I want to go, or there nobody is talking, so maybe I need to go and help and facilitate a little bit and help out. These are things that are so easy in a room, because you can, even if there's 100 people in a room, if you just are able to see and overview the room, you pretty much know where they could use your help a little bit. In breakout rooms, we just don't have these tools, and so we definitely need a lot more there of tools to help out with that. And then yeah, like you said, all these more modern tools where you can see rooms and you can walk around like it's a physical thing. I'm not yet convinced that it's good, but I'm really happy that they're playing with this, because we definitely need more experiments in that kind of style. I don't know what it will be, but we definitely need more experiments in these kind of things, because that's the future is in these experiments and learning from them. That's for sure. So thank you for bringing that up, because yeah, we just been talking about Teams and Zoom and yeah, these kind of things, but there's a lot more in the world today. Thanks to, and like you say, thanks to COVID, we know a lot more of that.
True.
Okay, let's move to that next question. And I know that you have some interesting books there. So, what's a book or a series of books that you want to talk about?
I know that that in your conversations, these kind of books around humans working and neuroscience are often very popular, and I'm in that camp too. Those are I'm very interested where that intersection between neuroscience and organizational behavior, I think. So I would say probably about 10 years ago, started digging through as much of this as I could find. And that's kind of where my reading preferences lie. And one I hadn't really heard, an author I hadn't really heard mentioned here too often or at all, David McRaney. So when I think of
and that's the books that you were talking about with David.
Right. So I believe You Are Not So Smart was his first. And he has a blog and a podcast around all of these concepts. He's speaking mostly about cognitive biases and then the heuristics that our brains use to develop those cognitive biases. So the You Are Not So Smart and You Are Now Less Dumb are kind of compilations of his podcast and blog originally, but he writes and talks in and around this space. His latest one is the one you had up there in the middle, How Brains Change, which is he's speaking directly to, how minds change. But this thing we know about humans now is that we can often be faced with factual data and still where that factual data conflicts with our beliefs.
We don't hear it.
We don't hear it. We are not swayed by facts. And this is kind of true for all human beings, all human brains. And so he's digging through that. So that actually, I haven't read that one, but that's next on my to-do list. It just came out a few months ago. So, but when I think of I would say one of the seminal works in this area is Thinking Fast and Slow. And I by Daniel Kahneman. I know it's been mentioned here before, but whereas that one is It could actually serve as a textbook on cognitive biases. It's written by an economics professor. It is, for a lot of people, it is kind of thick. So it's not, I would say it's not a book that like it's not a page turner that you're gonna, you know, read before bed and whip through anything. It's actually would be great for a book club, because if you could break up the book in smaller chunks, or maybe do like a book charting exercise as part of your book club, where each person just reads a portion of the book and then shares what they learned. That would be a great book for that. It's a wonderful tome. I've read it a couple times. I come back to it over and over, but it's because it's dense and it's a lot for a lot of people. So that makes sense. But if you're interested in those topics and you just want something that's a little more digestible for the layperson, I would say definitely Dave McRaney has a very entertaining writing style, and then lends itself very well to spoken word too. So if you're more of an audiobook person, definitely jump in on those. He's humorous, and it really will probably change the way you think about why humans are the way they are, and how they think. But I think for me, all of those things are useful in my own agility practice too, of like trying to keep an eye open for when I think we're falling prey to some of these cognitive biases, like groupthink or recency bias. Recency bias is a huge one in our line of work, where we can tend to focus on the latest problem that cropped up and don't investigate whether that problem is the most valuable problem to be solved, or is it having a bigger impact than other problems we have to solve. But we tend to run over and finish or address it because it was the most recent thing to happen. So being aware that those things are happening has been beneficial for me in my agility practice, and try to keep an eye out for them.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, and I fully agree about Kahneman's book. And it's I actually had a few book clubs, and at my current client, we're talking about the exact same book, and maybe launching a book club. We're this podcast will probably go live in January, but it's recorded in December, and in I hope in January maybe we start actually launching it, because at the end of the year we don't want to launch a book club, but I've done it a few times at other locations, because it's that, like you say, it's a dense book to read. It's hard to read. You need to, and these kind of books, I need discussions to understand it, because probably I'm not smart enough, or I'm overlooking, and yeah, it is hard to understand, and having discussions is really helpful to understand it. And every time I have such discussions, I kind of understand a little bit better, or maybe I forgot some parts of it, but it's good as a reminder, because it's a hard book to get it. And I really like the example that you give of recency bias, because yeah, I had a discussion with one of my children that says, yeah, but I did understand this way earlier and way before that they thought. I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, now you're in your 20s. It's easy to see that you understand this now, but that doesn't mean that at 6 years old you already understood that part. It's these kind of things, like, no, there's definitely things that took you a while, and you might not know at what point you learned it, and maybe you learned it earlier than in school, but you definitely didn't learn it at 6 or 7, whatever. So, and I think in Kahneman's book there's a lot of that, and especially I can't come up with the new name of his new book, but there's a lot there as well. I'm looking at Noise. That's the book that I was thinking. Noise is the next book after Thinking Fast and Slow. There's a lot there as well about how we misinterpret data that we have, and it's both are really interesting books to learn about how we misunderstand the world around us at multiple levels. And I would definitely urge all agile coaches and anyone who has anything to do with developing anything, any kind of product. If it's a team, if it's a product, if you're high up as a C level in a kind of company, you need to have a better understanding on these things. So thank you for bringing that up. And it's nice to have another kind of books or a series of books that are maybe a little bit easier to read than Kanban. And probably putting in, I haven't read them, but it might make me think again at a different level about similar kind of problems, because that's how it feels. So thank you, because indeed these are things that a lot of us, we need to think and rethink about it, because it's so hard. And the fact that go ahead.
Well, Kahneman's, the thing that's interesting about Kahneman is it's his teams who have been conducting the experiments in a lot of cases that prove out those cognitive bias. So you're going right to the source, or they've been collecting the data to inform their own experimentation. But it's also their studies that demonstrate that need that we talked about earlier, where there's like this fast brain and a slow brain. And in order to creatively solve problems, you need to give your slow brain time to think. It goes back to that conversation we had at the beginning about creative folks need time to digest new information and think their way through solutions. And his work proves that out. So.
Yeah, and the conversation I had with Linda Rising here on the same podcast, we talked a little bit about the book as well. And she said that I give myself, for some things, I give myself 10, 15 minutes. And if I can't solve it, then I just stop worrying and working around it. And then I just know that in the back of my head, my other brain will keep working on it, and I will solve the problem. But if I can't solve it consciously in the first 15 minutes, it doesn't make any sense to keep pondering on it, because it doesn't work. I need to trust that other brain will keep working on it and will solve it. And I found that such a strong statement to say, okay, just give myself indeed a little bit, because some things can be solved in 10, 15 minutes with active work on it. But for others, you just need to, okay, if it doesn't work, drop it. And that for me was a very strong statement. For if a smart woman like Linda does that, it's like, okay, I probably should do this much more. Just stop fiddling and figuring it out in a different way.
Sometimes just walk around the block is the smartest thing you can do.
Exactly. That
do something else.
Do something else. Let us go whatever. And in some companies we're not allowed. We should be sitting at our desk and typing all the time. Well, no, maybe that's not how we solve it. And actually procrastinating is actually having our brain work on something that we have no idea what it's working on. But it's hard, just for ourselves and the people around it to do that kind of thing. Okay, let's move to, for me, one of the most interesting questions is, what question do you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
I thought this was the most difficult question. What should you ask? I could be a little cheeky and refer to something that we talked about before, but I think that what's the question that everybody has, which is like, what's the agile best practice I should use? And then the answer is, it depends. I said it was cheeky before I started, but that is, I feel like that's the question that so many organizations have. Just tell me what to do. And unfortunately the answer is, it depends. And then as coaches, we have to have, the immediate backup of like, it depends. What are you trying to do? It depends. What are the outcomes you're seeking?
Well, I think the word best is already rather dangerous, because it's because even if there is a best one in the current situation right now, in the future, that might not be the best anymore, because there will be a better answer. And I have a kind of allergic reaction to the word best practices, because it's a best practice is always within a context at the current moment, and in 10 years from now there will be another best practice. And what I, well, I don't know how, if you see it, but what I see a lot of companies is they kind of adopt the best practice and then they stick with it for the rest of the years, and then they
Yeah.
don't improve anymore.
No,
And for
no whatsoever.
yeah, and for some things that's fine. I probably have a few things that I do that are best practices for, I don't know, for cleaning the toilet or for whatever. I have some ways of doing it, and probably other people have smarter ways, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, if there's
Yeah.
something I've learned when I was 15 or whatever, that's fine. But sometimes it's good to look forward and say, okay, is this still the best thing? And this is why I like so much when juniors join a new team, because they might have learned something new in school that is a new best practice, and then people inside the company are like, wait a minute, we're doing that the old way. Well, yeah, maybe the world has moved on. And so best is a really dangerous one. I had a discussion, I think it's also already 15 years ago, I think with GB Reinsberg or somebody like that, that we actually said, let's stop calling it best practices, but let's call them great practices, so that it's really, this is a great practice, and great is, it doesn't have that stamp on it like this is the best. It's great, so it's a good idea to start learning it and doing it, but it doesn't. Well, best has, for me, I don't know if it's just me, but for me it has the kind of feeling like it's defined and you don't need to look at it anymore. This is the best thing, and it will never. And that just doesn't exist. And so
it's almost borderline that this was a term I learned sometime this year of thought limiting cliche, that as soon as you say it, it implies there's no further thought or discussion needed around it. So
yes,
like the phrase, it is what it is. So once I say it is what it is, what I'm actually saying is we don't need to discuss it anymore, because it is what it is and it's not going to change. And best practice almost falls into that of like, if someone rolls up and says, this is a best practice, there's no need to challenge that. There's no need to talk about anything else. There's no need to contemplate doing it differently. This is the best.
Exactly.
And we know that's not true. So I've been playing around a lot, like looking for those things, thought limiting cliches.
I like that we need to create a list of all of these, because no, but it's really good that you mention it, and like I said, at some points it's okay that you don't need to improve everything, but so many things can still be improved, and even if you think it's good, yeah, it's always within a context, and of course, if I'm yeah, just the stupid example I gave about cleaning a toilet. If it's just inside my own house, and it might be fine. But if, of course, my job would be cleaning toilets, and I have to clean hundreds of toilets every day, every minute that I can make it faster or make it better. Yeah, exactly. And maybe if you do clean toilets in a hospital, then the level is even higher for whatever restrictions on safety and whatever. I might think that I might do it good enough in my home, but maybe that's not good enough for a hospital where diseases and things like that might be even more dangerous. I might not realize it that probably if they have an improvement, that would probably be better if I do it as well, but I might not realize it. But in a hospital, that might make several deaths a year or whatever. So again, even that can be improved all the time. So it's thank you for bringing that up, because it's and indeed it's a question. I like the way you phrased it, because it's such a typical question that we get. What's the best solution for this? And what's that? Yeah, it's and give me your best answer to this. Well, even if I had that, it still is the best answer today, and tomorrow I might have a better answer or a worse. I don't know. So it's it's a really interesting question to just make us think about these things. So thank you very much for sharing that. I want to move to that last question about who do you think I should ask next? Who do you think I would be a good person to invite?
Yeah, I suggested a colleague of mine, Tammy Gretz. So she's another.
That's her, if I'm correct.
Yeah, Tammy Gritz. She's a coach colleague of mine. We're not working at the same company at the moment, but we have in the past. And she's doing a lot of great things with larger organizations and really just having those conversations with them about, you're saying you want to make change, but what's the goal of the change? Often we're called upon, like, we want to do things differently, help us do things differently. Well, what made you think you needed to do something differently? And what were the outcomes you're seeking? So she's doing a lot of great work in that, and a lot of great work with helping either at the team level or, kind of across an organization, think about, like, what's an experiment we can try? What's something we can then, a question we can ask? What data do we think we need to gather in order to answer the question? And just move incrementally that way. So helping groups think through those kinds of experiments, doing a lot of great things with that.
And in a very scientific way, if I'm hearing it, because it's not just an experiment, but it's also with looking for data and what outcome do you want. So that's basically what we hope that many people would do if they were asking us for help. But like we've discussed earlier on, sometimes they just ask for one solution and the best thing, and then they are not looking for experiments. But we really want much more to move into that space. So then it's really good to have people who are really good at that. So thank you. That's definitely a person I would look forward to talk to. So, Faye, I would like to thank you for your time, but because we've been, it's almost 2 hours that we've been talking, or actually probably, I think a little, I don't know, because I see the recording is 2 hours and 7 minutes, but we started recording a little bit before we started chatting. So I don't know exactly how long this is, but I'm pretty sure if people are still around here, I think it's because you are such a wonderful storyteller and you tell such things that are really engaging. It's really, when I think Esther Derby was the one who proposed that I talk to you, and I'm not surprised that she did, because I'm really happy with this conversation. So thank you very much for your time. Now, if people want to contact you, if they want to reach out to you, what would be a good way to reach out to you?
Yeah, I am still on Twitter. As of this recording, I'm still on Twitter. When this gets published, we'll see. Keeping an eye on things over there, but I probably will stand on the deck of that ship, even if it sinks. I'll go into the water with it just to see what happens. But also, if you want to write more of a message, might be better on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be better about checking my LinkedIn messages, so please do.
I didn't prepare a link for Twitter for the exact reason why you said. So that's why I prepared LinkedIn, because, well, let's face it, in December today, Twitter is a very strange place. We have no idea. It's the last month. It's incredible how in just 1 month it completely changed. So indeed, that's why I don't dare to edit anymore. I will edit in the show notes, because that's easier to remove later on if things go really bad. But at the same time, like you say, I've kept it around. I keep checking it, but I check it a lot less, and I've been checking much more LinkedIn, checking much more Mastodon and things like that. So it feels like we're gradually moving away from it, and we need to see. It will probably take another 3-4 months before dust has settled to see if it's still useful as a place as it used to be. But that's also part of change, that sometimes we don't know what will happen. So, thank you anyway for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation. You went really deep and into really and some tough parts of both your life and the work that we're doing. But I think there is a lot of interesting things that you shared. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. This has been a fun conversation. Great to chat with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.